It's out. Well, that's fabulous. Who the heck knows? Something's going on with the music file. Something's going on everywhere. But, oh, it's because it's more frames. It's twice as many frames per second. My little demo. Oh, I get it now. Wow, there's a lot of things that happen when you switch over to 60p. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it might be to wherever you are watching. Welcome to PhotoApps.Expert live training. This is episode 1200, right? Yeah, 1200. We are starting with an overview of Polarr. This may seem like a chaotic start to the show, and it is because I have just switched this entire system over to 60p. So for those who are watching this for the first time, you won't notice any difference other than weird things like what just happened where the music stopped. For those of you who are used to watching this show, I would love to hear in the comments, the feedback, the live chat, whatever, how it looks to you, if it looks any better. And you should notice it mostly when I'm moving and dancing, which fortunately I don't do very much of. But also the screen might look a little bit different because the screen is going to be coming up at 60p. Anyway, let's do a little bit of background here. So first of all, this is going to be an overview show, which means if you miss any part of this, this whole show is going to be left for free, ad nauseum, indefinitely, yada yada, all that, for anybody to see, to get their appetite whetted about this app. Polarr is a really quite cool app that originated on iOS. And the idea, what happened to I can't hear anything anymore. The idea is that it's a photo editor, quite an advanced photo editor, as we are going to see, quite honestly more than I even realized since I had first looked at it a year or so ago. It has grown up a bit. Very robust, designed for iOS, but it now exists on almost every platform. And it has a complete feature sync across all platforms. This is remarkable. So, I shouldn't say complete feature sync, almost complete feature sync. New features show up first on iOS, and then very quickly they show up everywhere else. And that's macOS, Windows, Android, Chrome, which I'm going to have to borrow my kid's Chromebook and play with because this is kind of like hard for me to believe that that actually works. But you can get Chrome editing, apparently. I don't know, but that's what it says on the box. So I'm excited to see that. And it's really impressive what you can do with it. So we're going to demo today exclusively on macOS just because you have the mouse and you can follow along easier. However, this just tells you how cool of a company Polarr is. I reached out to them to tell them I was doing this, going to be starting this live training. They were super excited about that. They're pumped. It gave me a little feedback on, what's the whole iOS story. It starts here, yada, yada. And then I said, hey, I haven't looked yet. I was in my car. It's like, hey, guys, dictating, not typing while driving. I said, hey, guys, I haven't looked yet, but some iOS apps have this feature where you can see your touch. Pardon me. You can see on screen where you're touching, like a little red dot or circle, something shows up. I said Lightroom Mobile does that, and LumaFusion does it as well. And does Polarr do that? And they wrote back and said, get next week's update. They're adding it in. Now, that's not here yet. That's coming, I think, this Friday. That update's going to come. And no guarantees. Obviously, it may not, but that's what they said. They said, look for it in that update. And they're adding that in there because I asked for it. And that is so cool, which makes my training to you so much easier on iOS because you can then see where my finger, pen, touch, whatever actually is. So I'm crazy excited about that. All right. Excuse me. So that's it. We're going to spend today in Polarr on macOS, but it should be virtually identical, and it really does look virtually identical on all platforms. And we're just going to see a very quick overview of, and I say very quick because there's so much in there. We're going to go through each category briefly, and then over the next, I don't know, several weeks, couple months maybe, we will dive into individual features and really, really unpack them and start to look at what they do and what they don't do and analyze them more deeply and see how far we can push them and see if we can find problems and all that good stuff. So if you're new to the whole live training thing, that's how this works. You get to watch this overview completely for free, and this probably will be about 45 minutes long, give or take. And if you then decide you want to continue on, each individual course is viewable for free while it's live. And if you don't get to catch it live, you can purchase it for download from my site, PhotoApps.Expert, after the fact, and that's $4 to buy each video, or what is by far a better deal is to become a monthly member of PhotoApps.Expert at a cost of only $7 a month or $70 a year, which gives you unlimited access to all of the live streaming courses. And you can stream those instead of having to download them at any time. And if you do want to download them for whatever reason, you want to watch it on a plane, you can do that. There's a $1 fee to download, but the idea is it's there for streaming. So all good with that? Everybody happy? Let's get this thing started, shall we? Let's fire up Polarr. Let me find the right app. There it is. Let's take a look at Polarr. I got to keep remembering to hit this button to do it. Alrighty, we are looking at the interfaceless Polarr. And I say that because there's hardly anything here. It's really quite subtle. It's not, I like this, right? Very, very clean interface. Let's take a look. You got a bunch of buttons down the side on the left, a bunch of buttons down the side on the right. Up at the top, you've got your basic open, import, open, and then up on the top right, you have your save photo / export option. So let's just go through what these are. Let me zoom into this, and we have a text tool. And just by going through these, you're going to get a pretty good idea of the power. Just looking at the category names. Now, obviously, we're going to take a look into them too. But you have a text tool, you have filters, and that's fun. We're going to look at a lot of filters. An editing history, which will take you all the way back to the beginning of your edit. Undo, okay, yay, undo. Let's go to the other side here. Here, actually, I'm going to start, well, I'll start here. You have guides. Now, the guides are really cool. It's a whole instructional thing teaching you how to use individual features. You go to adjustments, A for adjustment. And by the way, those are keyboard shortcuts, the letters that are popping up there. It says adjustments. Then local adjustments there, and cropping and retouching. It has a little face on there, which kind of gives you a clue of what's happening in there. Now I'm zooming out, and Peter Blake is saying that buttons are hidden. Are you not seeing the full width of the screen? You certainly should be seeing the full width of the screen. Seeing these little buttons over here. Tell me quickly if you're not. Ryan, please confirm on your side that you're seeing the buttons on the side here when I'm zoomed out. Unless Ryan may have bailed on me because I told him he didn't have to watch the whole show. Oops. Okay, I'm waiting for Peter Blake to confirm that you are not actually seeing the buttons there. That would be very, very bad if you're not. While you're doing that, while you're confirming that, I'm just going to go and start diving into it. So as I click on each one of these, you'll see it pops up. There's the tools, there's our text tools, there's our presets, there's our editing history, which we haven't done anything yet, and undo. And over on the right-hand side, we've got our guides, our adjustments, our masks, our cropping tools, and our our retouching. Okay, Peter Blake is saying that he cannot see the edges of the screen. So anybody else watching, please confirm for me whether you can or cannot see it. Jess says she sees them. Okay, so Jess sees the buttons when I'm zoomed out. So Peter Blake, I can't even, okay, everybody else sees them when they're zoomed out. So Peter, maybe you're watching a cropped window or something, go full screen. I don't know, everybody else sees them. Okay, good. I can pull it up on there just to be sure. So let's go back to this. So we've got retouching down there at the bottom. So let's start with basic adjustments. I'm not going to go into the guides today because there's a ton in here. We'll explore this on another day. But I want to look right now at basic adjustments and just show you how far this can go. So just scrolling through these, you see there's a ton of stuff happening in there. Let me actually close all these up. So we can collapse each one of these commands. Not commands, but lists of features, we'll call it. So we get a nice overview. So we've got color adjustments, light, detail, vignette. I can zoom into this. HSL, hue, saturation, luminance, curves, toning, distortion, and effects. And let's just go up to the top and open up. And each one of these opens up to show a bunch of different stuff. So we've got color, temperature, tint, vibrance, and saturation. I think usually you don't see vibrance and saturation grouped together with color and tint, but it makes sense because it's all color related, so that's where they are. Everybody else is seeing, yeah, Peter, it's your Chromecast. There you go. Everybody else is seeing everything, so we're good. The colors are grouped together, and I think that makes sense. That seems logical to me. So color, temperature, because it does affect the color, the overall color, vibrance and saturation, good. Okay, so temperature, obvious things, make the image warmer or cooler. Tint up or down, so you can make it more towards green, more towards purple. We've all seen this before. One thing I want to tell you about, if I double click on a slider, it should reset to 0, and that's very, very common that you see that. When I was playing with this earlier, getting ready for today, on some sliders, but not all, so I don't know what the pattern is, but I'm on my MacBook Pro now with a touch pad, and I almost never click, meaning physically push down so it goes like that. I almost never do that anymore. It's always just tap to click, and so double tap to reset. For some reason on some of these, when I was double tapping to reset, you'd see it, let's say it was at -10, you'd see it pop to 0 and then go back to -10 again. And finally I figured out if I actually physically click twice that worked. So just a heads up, if you are using Polarr and on any slider, and you're on a MacBook Pro, on any slider you go to reset it and you double tap it and you're just doing the touch and it's not doing it, try actually clicking, and that hopefully will solve the problem. It's a weird little thing. I don't know if it's an anomaly that just happened that one time, or if it's a bug or what, but I just thought I'd share that with you because I think it's a pretty important thing to know how to do, to double tap to reset your adjustments. Okay, so then under light, dehaze. You can see what's already happening in the sky back there. Dehaze, basic exposure, basic brightness, basic contrast, highlight adjustment, take our highlights up and down, shadow adjustment, lift our shadows up. So this is a raw file that we brought in. So in fact, let me just reset everything. Let's go back to the bottom and hit reset. And this will be a good little test here. Let's just take our highlights down a little bit. So look, we're getting some more detail in the shot in the clouds over here. And let's take our shadows way up and pull some shadow detail in there. And right away, we're pulling a lot more into this image. Now, this is a raw file, as I said. I just did a Command-O, opened the raw file. And it is, as far as I know, it is using macOS's raw decode. But I'm going to confirm that because since they have support across all platforms, they might be using their own raw decoder just for consistency across platforms. But I will have to find that out for you because I don't actually know. But it supports RAW, and that's what matters. So we've got just shadow details. That's pretty nice little shadow recovery in there. And then your whites and blacks. Okay, then we go to details, clarity, sharpen, denoise. I like here's clarity. You've all seen clarity before. I don't need to go through each of these. We're going to save that for another day. Oh, look, here's, no, that one is working on the double click. Okay. Denoise. So we have a denoise adjustment in here, and you have color denoise and luminance denoise. Very important difference in there if you are working with an image that has color speckles that come from noise. You want to use the color denoise. If there's just general noise that's kind of like green, then you can use the other noise, just the luminance denoise, and you can try and reduce that. And sometimes it's a balance of the two. But you have both types of denoise in here, which is superb. Then you've got your vignette. So vignetting would be a D-vignette or a vignette. You got that. And then, of course, feathering, highlight, size, roundness, all those kind of things. HSL, this is really cool. Let me just reset all this. And again, we're going to go into all these in depth later. But I can choose a basic color. Let's say blues. I can grab my blues, purples, reds, whatever. We're going to grab blues. And then I can shift the hue. And you can see the hue of the blues shifting in the picture. Saturation, luminance on those. So we're not seeing an eyedropper to pick a specific, precise color, but you can pick a general color from the color wheel. Curves, you have not only your luminance curves, you've got those as you would expect to have, you also have your red, green, and blue individual curves as well. Toning, you can add a color tone into the shadows or into the highlights. So if I say I want to make my shadows, this is like defaults in here, I want to make a shadows green, blue, red, purple, whatever, or you can just grab in here and drag it around and add a color tint to your shadows, add a color tint to your highlights, and then play with the balance between the shadow and highlight tinting. Distortion, now this, okay, up until this point, we're seeing things that you're finding in all editors, including the biggest ones, like let's say Lightroom. Pretty common, we'll go with Lightroom. All the stuff we've seen in here, Lightroom hasn't so far had a whole lot over this, frankly, as far as the image editing side. Obviously, Lightroom does a lot more. But for the image editing, we're not getting into, we haven't found too many things here, if anything, that Lightroom has that this does not. But we get into distort, this is an important one. And one of my favorite features in Lightroom, honestly, is the distortion or correction capabilities, where you can say, oh, fix vertical lines or fix for horizontal, or you can say fix for all and it goes to square it, or you can actually draw lines across the scene and say these are supposed to be horizontal, these are supposed to be vertical. You can take lines that are like this in your picture and straighten them out. Remarkable. This doesn't quite do that, but you do still have pretty good distortion correction. So we've got, first of all, lens distortion. So if you've got some pin cushioning type effect, fisheyeing type effect you want to correct for, you can do that. It also does a horizontal distortion, one side or the other, and then it does a vertical distortion. So if you have a building that is leaning forward, leaning back rather, you can correct for that to some degree in here. But if it's a severe lean, if you've got, oh, maybe that's why, is that right? Oh, there we go. I was fixing the wrong presets earlier. Now I got my right page. Okay, if you have a building that is evenly tilted, then you could correct that. But if you were kind of off to the side and it wasn't evenly tilted, you wouldn't really be able to correct it with this tool. So just something to keep in mind. That's a limitation in here, but I mean, we're doing pretty good so far. All right, and then you got under effects is the last one. Fringing, so there's some funny things in here. So you get a little kind of echo effect in there. You've got pixelating effects. I'm not quite sure why you'd want to do that, but you can if you want to like pretend you're in Minecraft. Diffusion effects, which actually could be quite nice. And then you've got grain. You could add grain to your image. Let's add a little chunky grain in there, give it a little. All right, we should be back. I'm having a good day here, aren't I? There we go. Batteries died. See, there was a rush before the show. I forgot to check the battery level on that. Oops, don't do that. All right, let's go back to this again. Here we go. Okay, so we're looking at grain. So we are looking at the addition of grain to the image. Sign language, you like the sign language. So we saw that you can increase the amount and the size of the grain. So again, we'll go through all this stuff in detail later. Local adjustments. Let me actually reset what we had done here. Let's just reset that. Local adjustments. You have, and this is phenomenal, you can do adjustments based off of color. Based off of a color sample, what is going to be adjusted? Now, many of you who are fans of the Nick school of thought will be appreciating this and recognize this is a very familiar workflow to that. Choose, create an entire mask based off of color. That is phenomenal. I am crazy, crazy excited to see this in here. I think this is going to be a very wonderful thing to play with in here. So once you've created a mask, you have blur, temp, tint, saturation, vibrance, contrast, highlights. All the basics are in there, including a little color cast. Now I've created that. I go back into here and notice, if you saw this before, when I first went into here, we saw color, brush, radial, and gradient. Now that I've created one, it says color with a 1 right there. I can now add another color mask. So I just click that and it brings up the tool again. Brings this back up. Let's go down and like adjust the water kind of a range in there, and bring up the radius because I want to be able to adjust the radius on that a little bit. Move that around, make sure it's covering the whole thing. Or if you turn that off, then it just affects the entire image, and you can do whatever you're going to do to that, right? So there's that kind of control in there. And now when I go back, and now we have 2 colors. You got a color and a second color. You can do the same thing with brushes and radial gradients. So we can do brushes. Oops, wrong one. Well, okay, we're going to do radial gradients first because that's where I am. So a radial gradient, just to see, you can basically see what's happening there, your exposure affecting the outside of that gradient. Now, or you can invert that and affect the inside of that. Now, I want to point out that for my personal workflow, which primarily resides inside of Lightroom, I have come to use the radial and linear gradients, both of which are in here, for the vast majority of my exposure adjustments. If I'm going to do any kind of dodging and burning, right, to use the old school terms, if I'm going to do any kind of dodging and burning, I will always first grab a radial or a linear gradient, depending on what the shape of the thing is, and try it with that, because it is so fast and usually so effective. I can do that and move on, as opposed to brushing around and trying to get it works phenomenally well. So I'm really excited to see how well it works in here, and to take some images that I have worked with in Lightroom, open them in here, and see if I can just as quickly do the same type of adjustment. So that is phenomenally cool. I'm stoked about this. When I discovered this in here, I was like, yes, this is a beautiful thing. And you can do this on iOS as well. Crazy, right? Okay, so there's that. Well, all right, so we've added that one in, and now I go back and you see it's, again, color, and now the new radial. You get gradient masks as well. So color, based off color selections, brushes, radial masks or gradient masks, all built into there. You've got your cropping tools in here. You can choose your different aspect ratios. You can rotate your image, of course, and crop and flip it and so on. So if you want to flip your image the other way, that's all in here. Reset is there too. Now, it looks like my history is open over here. You can see the history of what we've done in here. Nice long history going all the way back to the beginning. Let's hide that. Okay, so now let's see, that's reset. Now let's go into retouching and see what we've got. There's this face thing, and I'm going to open up a different image to play with the face. You've got spot removal. So basic spot removal and go in here, and we can say, well, let's You know, just as yeah, what's what a good spot. This is, you know, really probably use this for little tiny things, but I don't have a good spot here to get rid of. But basic spot removal, we will explore this more later. But you do have that. You can either heal or clone. So if we look at that, you've got spot removal, healing, or cloning in there. And then you on add spots, you can continue to add spots. You saw that. Remove spots. Liquefy, so if you want to do a whole liquefy kind of thing, look at that, immediately pushes us into the world of distortion in there. You can warp, pinch, bulge, or restore. So we've seen some of this stuff in other apps before, and now we're seeing it on frankly, a very simple level to work in. And face. So, oh, actually, I just got a built-in sample. I didn't even see that before. Okay, well, I'm just going to use their built-in sample. That makes it easier than me finding the picture that I was looking at earlier. So it has detected 2 faces automatically. Let's go up in here. Detect face 1, detect face 2. Detected, already found. So I click on face 1, and I go, all right, well, there's an auto button. Well, it auto changed her. Let's turn that off. I guess I have to reset. And let's see what we've got. So skin smoothing, tone, evening out the tone in her face, lifting the shadows up a little bit, pulling the highlights up or down, usually down. Hue, if someone's got a little sunburn, we can pull that out a little bit. Saturation, if they're looking a little monochromatic, we can fix that. We reset all those. But look at these. Face width. Let's make her face a little bit wider, a little bit narrow. Chin height. Let's make her chin a little bit less. Forehead height. Let's make her forehead a little bit more, a little bit less. Eyes, eye size. Let's give her a little bit bigger eyes, smaller eyes. Now, obviously, these things, subtle changes go a long way. Brightness in the eyes. Look at her eyes. Look at the change in the brightness in the eyes. Add a little contrast into those, maybe a little clarity into the eyes, bring the brightness back up some more. Just remarkable. And it's all finding it automatically. It just went, oh, there's a face. There must be an eye and a nose and a mouth here somewhere. And it's doing it. This is really cool. Oop, wrong one. Got to find the right button. There we go. Nose adjustments, nose width, nose height. You can move mouth changes. You can add a little bit more of a smile in there. Mouth height, if you want to make the mouth a little taller, a little wider, a little brighter on the mouth, a little spotlight on there. Saturate or desaturate the mouth in there. And then even teeth, individual teeth controls. Let's whiten those teeth up a little bit, take it up or down. It's actually not making much of a difference on her. She's got pretty white teeth to begin with. But that's kind of crazy. And then here we got a little before and after. Okay, the teeth are, I mean, obviously I was just kind of going crazy on it, but I took the brightness down on her mouth. That was looking pretty funny. That is, what do you think of that? Is it just me, or is that kind of impressive? That's really well done. Usually when I see these kind of face distortion things that are not automated is not the wrong word, but very specific. Oh, widen the eyes, brighten the eyes, change that, make it smile. Usually they just don't look right. Past like 2 points of adjustment, they just fall apart. This is holding up really well, so I'm really looking forward to playing with this a whole lot more. All right, let's see here. There's all that, so that's face. So that's a quick overview of that side. Let's take a quick look at the text tool. I'm going to go back to, let's close that photo. Let's take me back to my picture since this is a sample. That photo is already open. Close photo, that photo is already open. Well, that's not helpful. Well, down here at the bottom, you have a little list of the previous photos that you worked on. So we can pull those up, and I think a couple of these are just sample pictures. Loading photo, and so let that load. We're gonna let that load. Oh, you're not even seeing it. Well, there you go. It's letting that load. Down here at the bottom, sorry, I didn't realize I hadn't switched over. Down here at the bottom, we have little thumbnails of previous images that we worked on. It is, in theory, loading that photo, but we are waiting for it to do it. You know what? I'll bet it's having to download it because that is a sample photo. Let's just try one of my pictures. There we go. Okay, we got my picture. Curiously, when I pulled this one up before, so it automatically found the face, but the box is obviously not in the right place, right? So, but as soon as I clicked on it, it moved. See, it just moved. So it's just like a UI glitch. It's drawing it in the wrong place. But here, you know, the eyes, I can do a adjustment on the eyes. It's really quite cool. Okay, let me pull up a different picture. I want this picture to load. I want a different picture. Unable to load photo. Genius. Well, that's their sample picture. Let's just bring back this one, and I'll reset everything. Which actually, where's a full reset command? Save as a batch exports. There's batching. We'll look at another day. Let's just go to the history and go to the very top of this, shall we? I wonder what's up here. Revert to original. There it is. Okay, let's take a quick look at text and then at presets, and we're going to call the overview a wrap. And I see the questions in the chat, guys. I will come back to those momentarily. So you've got text, double click to add text. Let's call it my trip to, I don't know, the coast. That's too much. Let's just go my trip. My trip. Cool. All right, so I've got this thing that says my trip. I can position that wherever I like in here. I can, of course, choose a different font. You also have all kinds of really interesting adjustments in here, other than your obvious size and line spacing and stuff like that. But you can convert that into outlines. You can invert it, which is really cool. So if you want to do something where you're cutting out the text, you can do that. Well, and then delete and duplicate. So we can duplicate that, say my trip to here. And there we go. So you got the whole inverted thing going on. Now, that said, that is one thing. I go back into text, back out of here, go to shapes, and I can add a shape onto this and do the same type of a thing. So now you start to see, all right, it becomes more of a graphical element type of a thing. Or you could invert that, which, I mean, by default, it comes up like this. You got a white shape, but that's not cool. But if we invert it, oh, now we got a punch out. That's kind of cool. So we can do stuff like this in here. And when I first started playing with it, I thought, okay, well, I back out of here, and I go over my adjustments, and I start making adjustments to the picture. Let's say I go in, I don't know, I like dehaze, change the exposure, whatever. And I go, oh, well, that must be permanent. I guess I can't change that anymore. But then I realized I go back into the text mode, and look, it's all still editable. I can do all of this. Now what happens when I delete that last shape? Is it going to realize that it's no longer there and revert? Yes, it is. So really, even though you don't see a layer stack, it's not like in Photoshop where you have the layers that you can go, or Affinity Photo, where you have the layers that you can go in and rearrange. The layer data is there, and you don't have to undo to get back to it. You can go into the text editor and move or remove your text, your shapes, and so on. Really, really neat. There's a couple of presets in here, not many, for text stuff. Like if I add this, it adds this to box and some text and another text. There's a couple of presets, but not many in there. Let's take a look. Let me undo that. Let's take a look at color presets, and then we're going to call it a wrap. So we have up here a bunch of presets, and at first glance, it's like, okay, well, there's a couple of presets, there's not many. But if you click on this, you'll see that there are a variety of preset categories in here, lots of them. So let's go for my Polarr film looks, and let's zoom back out, and I can try different film looks on here. And if anyway, I find one that I like, but it's a little bit too strong, you get a big old slider. Let's just back that off a little bit. I can go look at landscape air ones, airy little landscapey presets, and so on. You can import filters, and you can create new filters and save them out. You can not only create them for yourself, but you can save and share. You can create a, as far as I can tell, and I got to look into this a little bit more, what appears to be a free Polarr account, which allows you to share the presets. Pretty cool. So once we get into the whole preset view video, which I think might be the next one, actually, I might be starting with presets, we'll look at how to find and download additional presets, load them in, and so on. So that's the basics of it. Pretty remarkable, right? Now let me, since this does work, right? I did get this working. Maybe I didn't. It was working. I don't know where it went. Oh, no, there it goes. I want to show you, just so you can see that it looks virtually identical on the iPad. So let me let it launch over here, and I have to figure out which system this switches to. I think, let me load a photo. How about a food photo? Why not? Oh, it's downloading from iCloud. Well, we gotta let that download from iCloud. Oh, there we go. And I hope I set this up right. Yes. And there we go. Over on the right-hand side, you can see the same buttons. There's my adjustments, cropping, brushes, and all that good stuff in there. On the left side, we've got our history. We've got our presets. And here's something neat that we'll see if we can do this over on the macOS side as well. I can rearrange these. So if I wanted my filters over on the right, I just tap and hold on that and drag it over, and now I got my filters over there on the right. Let's put that back though. You can do that. You can reposition them. So we will play with this quite a bit more later on, but there is virtual feature parity across everything. The only difference apparently being that the iOS one might have more things than the macOS one does. How do you think? What do you think of that? I'm stoked. I'm really excited about it. I'm going to have some fun demoing this over the next few weeks and months. Pardon me. Let's see what's going on. John Warby is saying, you remember the grief that I gave you about checking batteries when you recounted the tale of your battery pack dying mid-shoot last month. Do as I say and not as I do. I'm sticking to it. Patrick says, how would you compare Polarr with Affinity Photo? Okay, very fair question. I'm going to hold off answering that in entirety until I've really gotten through this more. But on first glance, Affinity is certainly still more robust. I mean, just think about the export module alone with all of its different abilities to export out different layers on or off. And you have your presets where you can export a layer at a crop size or disable certain layers on export. All of that is there. You actually see your layers with your masking. Right, I haven't seen any difference blend modes in here yet. So all those kind of difference blend modes, masking between layers, taking a piece of this layer, brushing that out to the next layer, proper layers, layering multiple images is all something you can do in Affinity. That is not something I'm seeing over here. This is more, I would say if you're a Photos app user and you want a more robust editor, this is a beautiful place to go to. If you are if you're not using any big asset manager, you just have pictures on your hard drive, and you want a really good editor that's quite simple and easy to use and understand, I think this is very good. I just like to have another toy, and especially over on the iOS side for image adjustment, image enhancement, it seems to be a very, very good tool to have. So obviously, we're going to get more into it. I'll be able to answer that question better later, but there are some very clear, distinct differences between them. I don't know that if you have Affinity, if you need Polarr, other than you just want something simpler to use, but we'll see. We will see over time how that goes and see if my opinion changes or evolves, let's say. Ftonic says, can you import from Instagram pages already set up for sharing presets? Can you import from Instagram pages already set up for sharing presets? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Can you import from Instagram pages already set up for... I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Ftonic. Please clarify. And you see you wrote is one. Rewrite the whole sentence for me, please, and then I'll get that. Peter Blake says, I assume it's just an editor, not a DAM. That is correct. This is not an asset management tool. This is just an editor. So distinct difference there between this and something like Lightroom, but it's a great companion to Photos, for example. Now, from Photos, actually this, I think it's going to change with iOS 11, or rather High Sierra. I think from Photos on High Sierra, you'll be able to send the raw file off, whereas Photos now on Sierra, you cannot send the raw photo off without using a third-party intermediary tool. But we'll find out pretty soon because High Sierra is coming. Did High Sierra come out today as well, or is it just iOS 11? You got to run some software update when this is over, and we'll find out. Ftonic is saying use Polarr for the presets. I guess nice presets. When I was playing with them, there's definitely some nice presets in there, and I'm excited to see what the community has created as well. Peter Blake says, I like the features, but the catalog and online syncing features of Lightroom are difficult for me to dismiss. Oh, no question. No doubt. This is not a Lightroom replacement. Keeping in mind, Lightroom is... The only reason I draw the parallel to Lightroom was to say, look, Lightroom does a ton of stuff, and look at how much of it this is doing. That was really the only kind of reason I did that. Clearly, Lightroom, it's an asset management tool. It is designed for a professional photographer's workflow. This is not designed for a professional photographer's workflow, but it is a really powerful app for sure. Martin is saying he thinks that Ftonic, I'm waiting for you to rephrase your question, but he was saying, can you already import from Instagram? I don't think there's an import from Instagram. Let's just take a quick look at the import button. I think this is, it says import, but I think it's just an open. It's just an open. Yeah, there's no like import from other tools in there. Let's take a quick look at the settings down here. I always like looking at settings. So here's your account. You can set up your account for Polarr. You can change your theme, dark theme, light theme, custom language in here. You can get Polarr for iOS, for Mac, for Windows, just shortcuts to that. This is interesting. It's something we're going to have to play with. Max export size, 16,384 or 32,768. Quite seemingly random numbers. That's big, 32,000 pixels wide. So I'm not really sure what that means. So we'll find out. We'll play with that when we get to that stage of it. Reset and saved, edited labels, load last photo on launch. You can have it reload that. This is cool. You've got a little intro that'll come up the first time you launch it. You can have it show that. But this adjustment guide is neat. It takes you through what each tool does, and you go, oh, okay, so that's how that tool works, right? That's pretty cool. I like that. So we'll just skip that for now. And, oh, how did this come? Oh, I was wondering where that was. I guess just click on the image and that comes up. How curious. Huh. And there's your image info. Oh, look at that, learn something every day. Okay, and let's go back into this. And the last thing on here I wanted to show you was keyboard shortcuts. You get a little pop-up overlay here for your keyboard shortcuts. Curiously, I know this sounds ridiculous, but curiously, I haven't found a keyboard shortcut to zoom in and out. Like you would think Command plus and minus would zoom in and out, but it doesn't. Command minus, Command plus, no zoom. Command 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't do anything. Command O would be open. Genius. Command 0 doesn't do anything. I can scroll, right? I'm scrolling now to zoom in and out of the photo, but there's no Command 1 or whatever, no Command plus or minus. So I'm a little curious about that, and I do plan on digging into that a little bit to find out why. I'm going to ask them, because that seems weird. I guess it makes sense coming from an iOS side because it is a port from iOS. I mean, port's probably the wrong word, but I'm going to use it. It's a port from iOS where you don't have Command plus. Most people don't have the keyboard. I mean, a lot of people have the keyboard, but you don't have to have the keyboard to do photo editing. So keyboard shortcuts seem to be a bit of an afterthought, but that seems like an important keyboard shortcut to me. Tell me if you disagree, but I think it's an important one. Davey Huang, HLG or Vlog? Well, this is still a photo editor, not a video editor, so that question does not apply to this. And that's that. Okay, cool. Simple overview. So if you guys want to know more about this app, I will be, again, spending a bunch more time going into individual components of it, digging deep in, simultaneously, primarily looking at macOS because it's easier to see the mouse, but then also we will switch over to iOS, especially once we get the visible finger touch on there, and explore and see how it looks in there, look at the differences, and in some cases see what is on iOS that is not on macOS or Windows or Android or everything else, since it starts on iOS. iOS gets it first, according to the company. So that is that, my friends. Sorry for the kind of kerfuffle bumble in the beginning there. We got a little bit of madness going on. Peter Blake's asking 1 or 2 videos a week on this. 1. My 2 was a little bit manic. The only reason I did 2 on Affinity was because I was covering the same feature on 2 different platforms, and I've decided I'm not going to do that this time, especially because they are virtually identical. I'm not going to do a separate macOS and iOS. This will be combined. So I'm only going to do 1 a week. That was a crazy schedule that I shouldn't have done, but once I started, it was hard to stop. Plus, I didn't want to end up spending half a year on Affinity if I did it on both. So 1 a week on this. Okay, Evtonic says, here we go. Here's this question. Sorry, if you go to an Instagram account like Polarr Presets and screenshot the QR code, then you can import another user's filters. Ah, okay. Well, we will be playing with that, I think, on the next video, because I'm pretty sure next is presets. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much for coming along and hanging out today. I hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.